Welcome back, one and all, and thank you for joining us here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. It's our final series here for Asia Pacific, and I got to say, it is absolutely the match of the day so far. We have Glory, our representative, going through to the World Championships later this year, and the runner-up for Season 1, Surrender, narrowly missing out on getting his second victory, his second ticket 2 years in a row to the World Championships. And now we have a repeat of that, Gia. Maybe now Surrender can get his revenge over a well-fought series last time.
For sure. He also just had a very narrow victory to be able to even make it to this decide, narrowly losing out to Flurry a while ago. It feels like all of the series today have been down to the wire, except for that starting 3-0 from Chonsu. But it doesn't feel like it's been a long day whatsoever because there's new archetypes, new cards, and even new faces, at least for tomorrow, to be had everywhere in this season.
Yeah. I could wait and cast all day, is I believe what Matt Pager would say about this. But with Priest out of the way, I could even more be excited because even though I think the modern version of Priest with Highland version is very cool, it's still Priest. The old hatreds are the hardest ones to kill off, it's got to be said. And even though Priest is, like I said, in somewhat of a cooler, newer form here, I'm still more of a fan of these aggressive archetypes that we're seeing from Surrender and Glory with Tempo Mage for both of these players, Aggro Rogue. Tempo Mage for both these players, Aggro Rogue for Glory, and for Surrender, again, that Libram Paladin, which has been just a bit of a question mark, up and down, looking powerful, but also looking kind of weak in spots as well.
Yep. I also agree that I much rather cast decks that play 30 instead of 50. And so with Priest out of the way, it might look like a bit of an anomaly based on Glory's previous bans, where he banned out Warrior in the two series that he fought there. But it looks like Priest is definitely second on his priority list. And now that he's run up against Surrender that doesn't have Warrior, there might be even more room for Glory's aggressive strategy to shine. It's that Rogue that I'm looking at again to pull out a 2-second victory.
As am I, Gia. But before we get there, we're going to start off with a good old Druid mirror. I'm sensing a theme here, even though I think heading into it, I was definitely expecting to see a lot more Druid bans. We've so far seen today, I think none, right? It's only been Warrior and Priests that have been banned away from either side. So get used to seeing this. It's going to be a common matchup.
Yeah, based on the Swiss totals of bans, even across all the other Grandmasters in Asia Pacific, Priest was by far the most banned class there. I don't think Druid is quite that high on a priority list right yet, and it's just showing that most people are bringing Druid and Priest to begin with because they see these two decks as being the instantly powerful in the field. Very likely to change in the near future, but for this week at least, I am totally down to cast some more Druid.
As am I, especially as there's a lot of interesting things you can do in the early game, specifically with the interaction of nature studies and guardian animals here, because I think for Surrender here with 2 copies, you're probably chaining one into the other because you still leave yourself with the buff potential for guardian animals, or more likely any ramp spells that you're able to pick.
You brought it up a while ago, but the interaction of nature studies and wild growth, I think, is also a big one. Not everybody in wild growth. I think it was Chontu that even had 2 of them in his list, and we've seen how successful he's been so far. I wonder if that is going to be a more common inclusion later on. But for Surrender right now, all of these are looking quite slow. Turns out is his pick here. I was looking at Forest 8, honestly, just because maybe a bunch of 2/2s is not within the Druid arsenal to deal with these days, but it comes down pretty late.
That is true, and if you had to say whether the fuel for Kael'thas has been lacking or the payoff has been lacking, it definitely feels like the payoff spells have been the bit that haven't turned up. But cards that have turned up, Wild Growth is the premium option there for Surrender to keep ramping up. Guardian Animals next turn, let's go.
That is absolutely nuts. And given that he's drawn 2 beasts, it is more likely that he runs into that Lake Thresher. I think for Surrender, there's just 1 of each left now.
So, Gia, we often talk about or see in this matchup the timing of your beasts, because there's a lot of interplay that happens with Lake Thresher, unstealthing your Twilight runners, wanting to play it when they can immediately attack into something. Yeah. Is there any benefit to just holding back because you don't want to go for an immediate Guardian Animals here?
I think the main benefit is actually how the curve overall plays out, more so than, you know, trying to get more value out of the rush. Because had he gone for the Coin Lightning Bloom into Guardian Animals, he would have only had 3 mana available for the next turn, not even able to germinate. Whereas if he goes for it this way, Bloom Animals next turn, then on the 6 mana turn he would end up with 4 still available, and then he could germinate something. So I think I like this better for an overall game plan. Does mean though that Glory can pop off in the next turn.
I mean, both players can start popping off really in a pretty extreme fashion here.
Oh wow, Surrender's still holding on.
I mean, this is it, right? This is the counterplay that we're seeing is specifically when you have to factor in Lake Thresher, is that you don't want to play Guardian Animals into an empty board. You want to play it when you can immediately rush in and get that benefit.
Yeah, it's very patient from Surrender, but I definitely like the look of it, especially since he didn't have Kael'thas of his own to try and get an immediate survival of the fittest, which kind of negates the of Lake Thresher on the other side. Oh, and an owl as a pretty bad outcome. Oh my goodness.
And a missed attack there from Glory to be able to clear off the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for Surrender, is this the pop-off turn? It's really to say, because if the Kael'thas gets cleared this turn, then suddenly he's losing the benefit of possibly playing it with 0-cost Bog Beam and Ironbark next turn. But he could just be saying, well, if I get a bunching beasts, then the Kael'thas almost always sticks.
Yeah. I think that's probably the line he's going for, and I like it a lot.
It misses on the Thresher, but it's absolutely fine as long as he gets rid of the opposing Kael'thas. And he can protect this taunt as well to protect the Kael'thas.
That's playable right now.
Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
Look at that! He can even over this heal his teacher's pet back up. Nutty.
Disgusting.
Job done.
And now what's the counterplay? Lake Thresher is in hand. He doesn't even have second Guardian Animals.
Yeah.
To try and find an avenue to victory. The Kael'thas is sticking. Best he can do. Play a teacher's pet and pray.
Thankfully for him, there is one turn of respite here where Surrender is unable to do anything very impressive here. Just has to clear up and push face for half his health total.
Imagine not spending 30 mana in a turn. Well, develop a stealth minion to give him a better shot of dealing with things next turn.
Yeah, like, the out, I guess, for Glory is like, play your Twilight Runner here, hope to draw Innovate, and then go like Ysera attack and get 7 amazing dragons or something.
Yeah. And if the Kael'thas isn't better, then Bog Beam plus a Crystal Power off the top can maybe deal with the Kael'thas, but we are grasping at straws here. Very much same as with Glory, because Surrender actually doesn't have a cheap spell for the second one. We can't quite survival this turn. But he can just go...
Right?
Oh, he can just overflow? Sure. For like 2 cards. It's just correct, I think.
I mean, it's low-key insane.
Yeah. I mean, it
pretty
unlocks
high-key
both
insane.
the Anubisoths, and if he just picks up 1 cheap spell, and he absolutely did, he had very few cards left in deck, so I think he could have made the odds calculation that this was likely to happen. Then you can fit in the survival and just set a easy 2-turn lethal.
Fair play. It worked out for him very, very well. And the whole legacy of this game, while we're talking about Surrender basically mopping things up here, is the fact that he so carefully sequenced out his threats. He had the option right at the start of the game on 4 mana to get out the Guardian Animals. He held back. He had it on turn 5. He held back yet again. Only doing it in response is what I think so beautifully led to him taking the victory here and going for a deserved 1-0 up over Glory.
And I have learned so much watching and casting GM. Just by osmosis, the way that these players can very clearly, even though not directly telling us what their mind state is at, how the game plan works out for them, and how the usual curve pans out, I think can really, really help out any viewers that might be struggling to go through these matchups on ladder. There's just a lot of nuances to be had. And even though for me that probably just goes from level 1 to level 2, whereas Surrender and Glory are on level 10, it's still an improvement.
We're always working our way up. I mean, it's how you get better, right? You obviously have to be playing a lot of Hearthstone in order to actually get to grips with the little interactions of the deck and how to be approaching the archetypes. But watching these pro players is such a great way to address any big like meta game, macro game plan mistakes that you have that you may not pick up on just through playing out the game on your own. Because Surrender there, I think, just doing a beautiful job demonstrating how you find the nuance in the Druid matchup there, in the mirror specifically. And with that out of the way, he's left with, of course, his two aggressive archetypes left, I guess, if you want to call them that, in the Libram Paladin and the Tempo Mage. Going off here with a matchup that I'd have to say, at first glance, would feel pretty difficult for the Libram Paladin to take a win in.
I would have to agree. Even though you call this more aggressive deck because it does curve out pretty consistently, I would liken this more to a mid-range deck. The way it tends to play its curve and the timing of when it power spikes reminds me a lot of Highlander Hunter. So in that regard, it feels like it definitely struggle against this type of deck from Glory. A bunch of stealth minions, bunch of face damage, and a bunch of efficient removal here. And Surrender's healing options don't come online until...
I mean, even with pretty close to the dream, it's got to be said here for Surrender with one drop, buff, get all that damage through to the face, and lock down board control. Glory still has board clear, gets another stealth minion played due to the delinquent here, beautifully filling out his mana curve.
I think this is absolutely the dream opener for Surrender, but the fact that he's missing on a 3-drop kind of negates everything, because now Glory, although not able to push face damage last turn, can just go wider now. Surrender is already going to be hoping to top deck Consecrate soon.
Although I will say, even though this was less good for Surrender than you might expect with such a good start, it does mean he's taking very little damage in the early game. He's moving on to his mid-game plan now, which can start pulling back. And even though the Lightforge Zealot is not perfect, it doesn't stack up very well against the Walking Infiltrator, the power plays are going to start coming down. Libram of Hope is insane. Lady Liadrin to give him another one is insane if he can find the time.
Yeah, this was... or it's going to be rather, absolutely perfect curve for Surrender. Burrowing Scorpid, just getting another stealth minion online for Glory is nothing to scoff at, but the fact that Surrender will get down a super cheap Libram of Hope on curve, nothing to do for Glory, especially since he doesn't have Secret Passage yet.
So unless he really believes that a 1-drop will be better than the 5+ card you can play, I'm a fan of holding back the first day of school, because maybe you get High Abbess Allura and you need the Spellburst effect in order to hopefully get a huge spell swinging the game in your favor.
I think the big question for Surrender is whether he wants to swing into the 2-1, just because that 2-1 is potentially going to go face again here, but Ashtongue Slayer, huge top deck for Glory here. +2 attack and immune on a stealth minion.
I mean, it's immune, but don't you still just send it face? Like,
yeah. For maximum damage.
It's close.
So you're looking at Backstab, Trade. Ooh.
Because you're sacrificing a fair bit of board control, it's got to be said, for 2 extra damage. Now that I phrase it that way, I'm actually leaning back towards trading again all of a sudden.
It's really tough because Surrender runs double Consecrate. So in the world where that exists, you might as well take the most advantage of the +3 damage from the Ashtongue and treat it as another Sinister Strike.
That's true.
I think the way Glory's deck is built means he wants to maximize the face damage. But he certainly needs more top decks to deal with that, because Surrender is getting down a very cheap Libram of Hope.
It's a huge difference here. Means that Glory, for the moment at least, outside of some extra help, like you said, is pretty much locked out of the game.
Oh, if he wants to clear this 8, the whole board, and the Hook Scimitar swing, Surrender has
and
so much room
downside.
to breathe now, and he has taunts to back him up.
Yeah, his other line of play would have left him with like a backstab still in hand, maybe an eviscerate, and it would have meant that against specifically this card, again, I'm letting Cast Division get to myself a little bit here, he would have been in a better spot. Whether or not that's better overall is very much open to debate.
Really tough to say. I think either line, Glory would have still had to rely on drawing Secret Passage at some point.
Yeah.
So I'm still part to, max face damage. Because if you're relying on Eviscerate second Sinister Strike to come off the top second Hook Scimitar, I think he would much rather give himself the least amount of health to have to plow through.
It's kind of a close choice here for Surrender because there is pretty much no way that he dies on this turn. Like, it would have to be Secret Passage into exactly a perfect set of cards, none of which come through for Glory anyway, but he could have gone with the Taunt on that turn instead. However, Surrender takes the risk on that turn, gets another Libram of Hope in hand, and locks up his spot at 2-0. A single game now, Gia, from both advancing through to the semi-finals on Sunday, and maybe even more importantly for him, getting his revenge against his now, I'm coining it, arch nemesis in Glory.
Sorry, the image you just put into my head was really, really funny, which is, sweet, smiley Surrender getting revenge on an arch nemesis. It doesn't quite make sense, but, I'll apply some cognitive dissonance here and say that that is absolutely the storyline that we're going for. Surrender on the brink of defeating Glory and stealing that glory for himself here. This rogue deck, I have to say, even though it fizzles really quickly, I just love it so much in that it's so pure in its intentions. It seems even more facey than Face Hunter these days.
It's a very facey face deck. I think that, as I've said a few times already today, I think that the slightly higher value version that has a little bit more generation for me is the way to go with the deck, because it still has the aggressive potential but has a little bit more mid-game to go along with it. However, for this version of the deck up against Mage, if you can get going really, really, really fast, you can just kill them before any kind of nonsense can happen with all the mana reduction from Mage.
The bad news for Glory, though, is that Surrender is... Wait, is he running the Violet spelling? Yes, there are 2 of them. And I have to tell you, with all of these stealth minions with their 2 health, Arcane Missiles is a complete nightmare. But I do have to agree with you in the fact that Rogue has more room to be refined. I think that we could be seeing as early as, in the other regions, I think Team Liquid's list is definitely looking to be high potential, the one that has Questing Adventure Edwin. You still rely on Secret Passage on getting those a bit bigger, but there's more value to be had. I think Rogues will definitely be leaning more in that direction. But I'm just saying I love this deck despite it probably not being the optimal list.
So a big impasse already here for Surrender as to whether he wants to go for, I would imagine, Coin Astromancer into Cram Session. Could be huge to get him a couple of extra cheap spells, but it could be disastrous. If there's a Backstab as the main thing you're looking at to be able to clear it off, you are in a much more dire position.
I think it's perfectly for Surrender to hold on to the coin, especially since you can get so much added benefit with just 1 extra mana if you have Sorcerer's Apprentice online. And the benefits compound once it gets to Mana Cyclone territory. But this is not the matchup that I think he should be relying on going for the big pop-off turns. Rather, he should be looking for a turn where when the Apprentice comes down, you better make sure that it's not just clearing your opponent's board, but it's got a good chance of sticking itself. So Glory would then be forced to take trades.
I can agree with your point there. I think it's like close as to whether he could have gone for Sorcerer's Apprentice there, just go for the missile straight away to reduce any damage at all. But with the way this is quite clearly looking to work out now, it's very, very strong for Surrender.
I like going double Apprentice right here now.
Yes, I do as well. You can go for the studies first in case you get a lab partner in order to draw 3 cards off of the cram session. But I fully agree with your point about double apprentice.
Yeah, and the devolving missiles, given that these 2 minions are just 2 cost and 1 cost respectively, there's a good chance that you're gonna end up with a 1/1 on the board if it's a 0 cost, and then the Solarian can even take a value trade, at which point he gets very, very far ahead. Okay, he gets the lab partner, so we're not going to see the other apprentice here, but same principle is that he's sticking even more minions, and that is the best outcome. I'm not. Can the devolving missiles hit a 0 cost minion, or do they just start dodging it?
Yeah, it can hit. Trust me, I've had enough times where it hits the same minion 3 times in a row, even though it's just a 1/1.
Definitely like the value trade here for surrender. The fact that he's held on to the coin. Okay, I guess this is just because he has Frost Whisper in hand. It's gonna deal with a bunch of 1-cost minions if they're not trading themselves.
I mean, he has to tank an extra damage here, right? Which is the scary bit.
Doesn't matter. 2 spell damage minions sticking. The Ross is just GG.
I mean, again, this is very powerful and it is easy to giggle at it. But this is a direct result of Surrender's play. You know, you and I were both advocating for the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which I think was decent, to be fair. It had its upsides, that's for certain. But by holding onto the coin, it gets down Raz a turn earlier and just obliterates this board. It was the perfect counterplay to the Burrowing Scorpion.
Who knew that a 3/2 would be so resilient against Rogue? The Solarian has stuck from pretty much the beginning.
So true.
Yeah, this is definitely a different style of Rogue. And now Glory is already defaulting to sending everything to the face. I think that is absolutely correct recognition of how he has a shot at winning this game. But it also involves some very specific optics on his end.
Yeah, it's the one and only game plan. And I think you're probably just jamming down Raz again. You know, if you could generate a Frostbolt off of one Thief, it would be insane. Or an Ice Barrier, of course. But you have the time to do that next turn, so just get the threats down and start killing your opponent.
The Raz is just pushing so much damage immediately. It just has that 3 damage essentially as charge. It's just setting up close to lethal here.
Speaking of close to lethal, Glory is right on the edge here. A secret passage off the top if Surrender does not find lethal on this turn. Could be enough to get over the finish line.
This is how Hearthstone's meant to be played. You don't care about anyone's board whatsoever. But Surrender has a bunch of chances to look for that Frostbolt, which could completely seal out the game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of interesting things with the order here. I guess going for one Thief here still allows you to hit Fireball or just the Frostbolt here, first of all. Surrender with an unbelievably fast 3-0 sweep. Takes down our reigning champion in Glory, and just like he does not give a single damn, gets him out of the tournament for the week before we can see him try again next week. And Surrender, Gia, is going to be our second player going through to the semi-finals.
Means it's Chonsu and Surrender, arguably 2 of the strongest players from South Korea, making it through to Sunday. It was so impressive today. It was so fun. Like, we started off with a 3-0, we ended with a 3-0, but middle there were these super tense series going to 5 games apiece. It's like we had a burger of a day with some very, very thin buns and meaty, juicy patties.
Not even going to touch that with a 1,000-foot pole as I move on to wrapping up the end of the day here. Even our producer is flabbergasted. That was next level here. But yes, that was, I think, a great recognition of not only for these players off to a strong start for them, but also the fact that South Korea here is just straight away putting its stamp on Season 2. Undeniably, Season 1 was Japan's season. All 3 of the Japanese representatives getting through to the semi-finals was almost unheard of in terms of one country's consistence within a region. But already now we are seeing Chonsu and Surrender, in my opinion, the 2 top South Korean players at this moment in time, getting through to the semi-finals already. This is, I think, a very strong omen of what is to come later on in the series.
And I have to say, Rivius also has been looking very, very impressive. He did have a little bit of an unfortunate issue that didn't allow him to complete all of the rounds of Swiss. But I think even despite missing 2 rounds, he ended up with a close to 50% win rate, or I don't even know, might have been higher. But when the meta is fresh and there's room for innovation, I would definitely have my eye on as well. But that does just about wrap it up for today. Tomorrow, we're going to be seeing the first of the new GMs play on stream in Bank Yugi. And I'm also especially excited to see Possessi. And I think Tyler's in there as well.
Yep, Tyler and Blitzchung will be joining Possessi and Bank Yugi for our matches tomorrow. Like you said, he is, as Bank Yugi are only one of the new GMs, alongside Tiz and Alan Numbers, were unable to make it through to the top 8. So he's going to be flying the flag for the newbies here in GM, and he's got a tough matchup up against Tyler, who's been jamming an awful lot of Hearthstone with the recent expansion, let me tell you. So without any further ado, let's send our lovely audience over to Europe with Raven and Sottle, where they're going to be taking you through their first day of action in the European region. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of GM for today.